So this is my basic composting system. I've got 4 bins. Things start at that end and they end up at this end. And this is the finished compost. Don't know how old it is, but sort of 12 months old probably. And it's looking pretty nice. I don't bother sieving it or anything like that. I just rely on turning it. It's lovely. And so this is my autumn compost. This bin was full at the beginning of autumn. It's just got a squash plant trailing into it right now, but this is my spring compost. This will get turned into here, and these are the bins that are currently working. So I'm going to pop up some diagrams now to explain exactly how all these bins work together, because it's not exactly obvious. It's not as simple as that gets moved to there and that gets moved to there and that gets moved to there. So let's go through the details. This is the system I've got. So I've got 4 bins and I've got slats at the front so that I can remove or add as many slats as I need to make it easy to fill and empty the compost bins. Now what I'm actually scrolling through here is the chapter of my ebook on composting, and you can find details of that in the description below. So basically I start off just adding greens and browns just like everybody else does in layers, but I'm not too fussy about the layers because really it wants to be mixed for optimum results. And once the bin is full, I turn it into the next bin. So that generally takes about a month. And what I then do is something probably not a lot of people do, is I add greens, and greens generally have some browns in them. So nothing is truly just 100% green. But what I then do is I just turn the previous bin back in and use it as if it was the brown layer. And what I find is that gives me a really fine grade of compost with lots of nitrogen, which I need because I grow a lot of nitrogen hungry plants. And it's a really simple system, and it means as well that I don't get as much shrinkage from my compost as a lot of other people do. So eventually I fill the bin again, and what I then do is I just turn it back. Now there'll be too much to go in the second bin, but that's fine. I just put a tarp over it and leave it. After a few weeks it's shrunk down, and it's probably been a little bit below the level of the bin because there's always shrinkage as the compost decomposes. So then I start the process again. I'm just adding greens and browns at this stage, and sometimes I don't have enough browns, so I'll use cardboard or stable bedding. And when that's all full, then again I'll just turn everything again, and you'll notice that I'm actually topping up that third bin, because I'm always topping up as I go to make sure all the finished bins are absolutely completely full of compost. I don't want them like half full or anything like that. So I'm going to skip through this because it's easier to just read it in the book and then just listen to me rabbit on about it. But basically I'm just repeating that process again and again and again until we get to the end. And in this case, I'm getting to the end in about August time. And at that point, 3 of my bins are full. So I start emptying the August one and using it to mulch my beds and all of that sort of thing. And then I empty the 3rd bin into the 4th bin again. I'll use that in spring. And I'll keep on going, and I'll use the 2nd bin, which will end up in the 4th spot in summer. So that is basically the system I'm using, and you think, wow, that's a lot of turning. Now if you didn't do all that turning, well, you wouldn't get such fine compost, you wouldn't get it as quick, and what you'd end up with is something like this, that your last bin, your oldest bin ends up being about 1/3 full, and then your second oldest bin is about half full, and your third oldest is about 3/4 full. But basically all your compost bins all end up at the end of the day at about a third full by the time they're ready to use. But with the turning process and keeping on adding greens, what you end up with is 3 full bins and really nice, fine, high grade compost, really chock full of nutrients and not just with a lot of carbon in them. So that's the way that I like to compost. There's loads of other ways, of course, and the book describes some of those, as well as the basic principles and the benefits of hot composting versus cold composting and all of that sort of thing, and all the other just general tips and tricks that I use in my day-to-day composting practice. So the vast majority of my compost right now is being made from sweet corn, winter squash, tomatoes and brassica leaves. I've got a lot of brassica leaves, and it's soon going to have a lot of this asparagus as well. So that's basically the autumn mix. So right now I've finished using this and put it onto that bed, and so I'm taking what will be my spring compost and just giving it its last turn. I'm adding a bit of water to it because it's a bit dry, and I am adding a little bit of this Marshall's Organic Extra, just 1 handful for each, I don't know, 10 spadefuls or something of compost, so not very much, just to give the bacteria something to get started on. So that one's full and it's nicely hydrated and kind of activated now. So what I want to do is just put this cover over, and then I put my workbench over the top. So I find it really useful to have this workbench on here. Obviously I've got this attached here for cutting, and just works brilliantly well. This one's empty now, so I'm going to turn this one into here, and this is pretty rough stuff, but give it another 6 months, turn that one into this one, and then in 12 months time it'll be ready to use. So whilst this compost here won't shrink very much, this one that I've just turned is still very rough, so this one will shrink, and so I'll need to continuously top it up from good quality compost that's gradually coming from these 2 bins here. So this is my active bin. I've just added a couple of feet of compost to this, and already it's at sort of 48 degrees centigrade. Probably by tomorrow it'll be up about 55, and that's the sort of temperature that I'm looking for. So at that temperature we're hot composting, the bin is releasing carbon dioxide rather than methane. Methane is 100 times worse than carbon dioxide as a climate gas, global warming gas, greenhouse effect gas. And so yeah, we want the bin to be hot if we can get it that way, and in order to keep it hot I will keep turning it. So as soon as this bin is full it will be turned into that bay. I'll then start filling this one, and then progressively, as I sort of, for each kind of step in here, so for each 6 inches of new compost that I add in here, new garden waste that I add in here, I'll add perhaps another 6 inches from here, and just keep on doing that. So I'm mixing the 2 bins, and that seems to really accelerate the rate of breakdown and balances the 2 bins nicely between greens and browns. And once that I've done like the last turn of that into there, that should be the point at which that bin has been emptied in the spring, that bin has been emptied into there ready for autumn, this bin goes into there in spring, and then I start again with 2 bins and gradually fill those until autumn, and then in autumn that bin gets emptied again that bin gets moved into there for the next spring. This bin gets moved into there, etc., etc. So that's the system. Works quite well. Get a few cubic meters of compost a year, and I try to keep it as weed free as possible. So finally, I just wanted to emphasize how incredibly useful the tops of the compost bins are for storing things, hardening off seedlings, being used as a workbench and all of that sort of thing. And you can see some of my seedlings there hardening off, and the actual IBC tanks as well, which I've put pallets on top of, they have proved to be a great area for growing carrots. So yeah, really useful. And I also use the tops of these water butts. This really is the kind of heart of my allotment, this area, for all sorts of different purposes. So I hope you like this quick video. My name's Steve. This is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.